couple of items. One is scheduling of a public hearing, and two, scheduling of public referendum. Want to be clear, and Peter and I have spoken. Tonight's not a night to discuss the merits of what you see in the document. It's to discuss what the council would like to see for a process to secure input from the citizens of the city. If there are questions around the data here that's in the binder, I've heard from some councilors concerned about the timeliness of some of the data. Data dated June 30 of 16, should that be updated? I think those are all fair questions to ask Peter of, and I know Sue's taken a long look at the calendar between now and the November election date if the council wants to think about hearing options. So with that, I'll open the floor if councilors have questions or comments or suggestions as to what you'd like to see for process, or if Peter has anything he wants to open with.
Well, what I would add is there is a proposed tentative schedule that was in your packet. And as you know, the next council meeting is next Monday, July 17th. And at that meeting, I would suggest that you acknowledge receipt of the report. And I think as the mayor has said, I think one of the big questions is the hearing process and when you would like to do that. The city of Lewiston, of course, is also reviewing what they want to do, and I had a discussion the other day with the Lewiston City Administrator talking about their process, and I think as much as we can coordinate what we're doing with what they're doing, if it makes sense, that would be a positive thing. Well, I think that in terms of the process, so that the citizens and the residents, the taxpayers on both sides of the city understand what's happening, so that when we are moving ahead, the city of Lewiston's moving ahead, that there's some coordination between the two. So.
Councilor Frost.
Do I understand correctly that it's entirely within the discretion of the city council to determine when this is placed on a ballot? That's the state process. Statutorily speaking, it is up to this council to vote either to put it on the November 7th ballot of this year or to make some other determination. We're not bound necessarily to have it on November 7th of 2017.
No. The statute's pretty clear. It reads that the municipal officers shall set the dates for the public hearings and for the referendum. So, I mean, there's quite whether you have a special election, obviously this is targeting a municipal election date, and there's a general question of if you have a public hearing with the intent to accept potential changes based on public input, would you want to then return the document to the Charter Commission for amendment and then have subsequent hearings on any changes? So this timeline, I think, assumes the hearings happen as a matter of process, because the timeliness of having additional hearings after amendments I don't think would hit Sue's timeline.
But if this council elected not to put the issue on the ballot in November of 2017, it would be up to a future council to then make the determination that it should be on a ballot for whether it's a June special election or November 2018. Either of those are options.
Or December,
or never at all. That's a possibility as well.
You have to set a date.
Well, yeah.
Well, when do you have to set a date is the question.
Statute's pretty vague.
I don't know that there's been litigation on this, but just looking at the sentence, it says that once the consolidation agreement has been submitted, well, basically after the consolidation agreement is submitted to a city council or both city councils, it shall be submitted to the voters of each municipality at a municipal election after notice and hearing as provided in paragraphs A and B. I'm sure one could make the argument that once it's been submitted for that original public hearing, that it should then be submitted to the voters at a election, and the a election would likely be the election subsequent to its submission to the public hearing.
But you could also make the same argument that if this council said, let's put this on the November 2018 ballot, that would also be within our province, within the statute to do that.
Again, it could be litigated. I think there's interpretations that could be fashioned on both sides of that argument.
Well, I think it's important for us to talk about exactly what our obligations are under state law to put this on a ballot and when that needs to be done. And from a plain reading of the statute, as Councilor Lee has said, it seems like that's pretty vague. This council could decide, okay, we received the report, let's put it on for 2018, or we can say, let's put it on for 2017. It seems like it's within our discretion to make that determination.
Within reasonable discretion, I think the driver of that I think we should talk about first, if we can segment that, is the public input component of this, that the scheduling and the number of public hearings, the statute is plural, that the council could have one hearing from the public, or could have multiple if it chose. And the timeliness of gathering that input and either allowing the Charter Commission to respond by taking the document back up and returning us an updated version or not will drive the timeline.
I think sort of putting aside the policy arguments as to whether or not we should argue it being on the 2017 or the 2018 ballot, I would beg a serious question as to whether or not this council would have basically the jurisdiction to say that we're putting it on a 2018 ballot when this council will no longer be constituted at 2018. So
But we passed a budget that authorized expenditures beyond our time in office, so why couldn't we?
because that's sort of something prefigured into most budgets that occur for most city councils across the entire state. I think this is a fairly unique set of circumstances. I mean, I'm trying to avoid the policy question as to whether or not this should be on the 2017 and 2018 ballot. I think that there are potential legal arguments that would say that we would lack jurisdiction to place it on a ballot where we will no longer be the city council.
What is that based on, Councilor Lee?
It's a non-litigated issue, as you know, as an attorney. We don't have the case law to point to. I think that there are very good arguments that would be the case, right? What basis would we have to set it for an election where we will no longer be the people who are setting that election?
This is a political issue, right? Which potentially one would argue in court is non-judiciable, right? Right? I mean, this is non-judiciable. This is something that's been left to our local governing body to set the date. So I guess my question comes back to, is there an obligation that it comes up in 2017, or is it within the province of this body to examine that issue as to when it should be set?
Was it in the province of this body to set the election for the 2018 elections? We're going to have to come back here. Our council is going to have to come back in 2018 and set the election, right? Set the schedule for the 2018 election. We wouldn't do that well in advance of the 2018 election, right? We're not going to decide the polling places for that election now, because there's an election that intervenes our authority to set that election in 2018.
Mr. Mayor, there's some of us that would like to see this on the 2017 election date, that we really don't want to see two people argue over when it's going to hit the road or not. We've been working on this a long time. Some others haven't, but there's a bunch of us that have.
Yep.
So we should be looking at, the best we can do is 2017, then do it. If we don't make it for that date, then we change it to, 2077 or something like that.
So I hear one nod towards targeting November of 17. What are your thoughts as to the public hearing schedule? Where and how would you recommend there be public hearings?
I think we should do one public hearing, one big one. We advertise it correctly, everywhere, every place. Put it at the college or wherever we can fit a lot of people. And if we really feel after that we need a second, then we do a second. Other than that, we do one, get it in place, feel out all of the differences, and move forward with that.
Other councilors, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I agree and concur with Councilor Walker. I'm hearing, the feedback I'm getting in the community is, let's get this, we want to vote. And when are we going to get this thing voted? And so I'm not hearing anybody say, well, we should put it off for a year or so. The people want to vote. And, you know, if you look at the basic question as to what are we voting on, it's you look at the statute, it's the consolidation agreement. And within that consolidation agreement is the proposed charter. And so I don't think that's a huge bite for people to look and study and get familiar with between now and November 7th. So I would concur with Councilor Walker that we shoot for a 2017 election.
Your thought on the public hearing?
Referendum. One public hearing with a call after the first public hearing to see if we need a second.
Councilor Burns?
You know, my biggest concern here is making sure that the process is transparent. In terms of when the matter is put to the voters, I would prefer us to come to an accord on how we want to structure the public input and then decide from there when it ought to be presented. I don't want to put the cart before the horse in terms of, you know, trying to pigeonhole a process into a certain electoral timeline if we don't think it's a good process. You know, I think in terms of the public hearing, I'm not opposed to a well advertised and well-structured single event, but at the end of the day, I would, you know, in terms of the question of when we're putting this to voters, I want to make sure it's predicated on when do we think we can have a robust public discussion about this issue with all the information.
Councilor Young?
It's a very important issue that won't come up again, probably. In some time, we should have not try to run out the clock or whatever. It's just people, I think, are ready to vote for or against, and it doesn't do us any good to drag this out.
Your thoughts on a public hearing?
Public hearing, and then we'll go see what happens after that.
Councilor Frost and then Councilor Lee.
So it strikes me as odd that the Joint Charter Commission would have as long as they've had to put together the work that they've done, which I appreciate, and I think that there's a lot to what they've put together that has some merit. I don't think that we should set ourselves to having one public hearing on this huge issue that's going to impact the future of the city. I don't see how that's a good decision for us to make. You're talking about one public hearing, you're talking about one night, 3 hours listening to both sides, 4 hours listening to both sides make their presentations. It just seems, after 2 years of work that's gone into doing this, that one public hearing doesn't really give an opportunity for both sides to discuss, to present the facts and lay it forward for the public.
Councilor Lee?
As I read the statute, it allows for amendments to be made by the Joint Charter Commission, and it seems to me as if we'd want to have a public hearing as soon as possible, because all the restriction is for a second public hearing on any amended portion of the agreement would be that it adjourns within 10 days of the vote, and that notice is given for that meeting 30 days in advance. So it seems to me like we'd want to be targeting August, and Lewiston would also want to be targeting August, so that we could permit any amendments that the Joint Charter Commission wanted to make, and then a subsequent a hearing for the public to have that would meet those requirements, and then also allow us a November 2017 vote.
At the very least, I would hope to see that the consolidation agreement would be updated with the most up-to-date financial information.
Right.
Hope we ask people to
I concur with Council Lee. I think we should do it as soon as we possibly can and get the process going. I don't have any interest in having these hearings in October, or, you know, let's get this show on the road.
So I'll float this. The plan is to have acknowledgement of receipt at the next meeting. Perhaps as part of that action, we could ask Sue and Peter to consider venue options and date options that may or may not conflict with other events or larger committee meetings, and bring that for the council. If the goal is to, let's grab a date and accelerate having the hearing, then we could empower staff to at least come up with a draft concept for that action next week.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councilor Pross's point, I guess my question would be, so this public hearing is part of the legal process for the joint charter, within statute. There's nothing to prevent other bodies besides the city of Auburn from conducting their own public events to discuss this charter, I would imagine. I guess a question, so if the concern is making sure that we do our legal, carry out our legal responsibility within statute, I think that's one question. And then a separate question is, what does a robust public discussion look like? But I'm not sure if the city has to have a monopoly on that conversation. I think we need to do what is required of us, and then it's incumbent upon the political process for those people who, either support or oppose this charter to continue to frame that debate. I mean, what other, are there things specific to these public hearings that cannot be replicated at a public forum that's not sponsored by the city in terms of referrals for amendment to the Charter Commission? Is only the city allowed to make those recommendations to the Charter Commission?
We won't be, I'll call a hearing to order, open a hearing, and wherever we go, we'll sit there until everyone who's wanted to speak speaks, and then we'll close the hearing.
So I guess I would be, I have faith in the political process. I think that people are engaged on this issue. I think to our own process as a city when it comes to other municipal issues, whether it's our own elections or other issues, I don't think we need to have an arduous process when there are those who have an interest in this political outcome who will undertake that process themselves. So I would like to see us do what we need to do legally and make sure that we have, that we fulfill our obligation to the citizens. But I don't think we need to be the sole facilitators of this political process.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
The purpose of the public hearing is to vent the procedure, the articles of the agreement, and if some of the pushback on some are added, it gives the Charter Commission an opportunity to change the agreement, whereas if it was just a meeting of some organization in the community, it would just be informational. It wouldn't be necessarily any obligation for the Charter Commission. You may not even know about it. It's the open and transparency involved of the political process. And Councilor Burns brings out some good points, but I think this is the only opportunity the Charter Commission has to change their plan to try to get people to vote for it. Am I wrong on this, Mr. Mayor? Is my understanding incorrect?
There's no other legal step other than the public hearings of the two cities that obligates public input.
All other meetings are just informational. They may get some press or whatever, but it's not going to, the agreement's not going to change for the outcome of outcries one way or the other.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question more than a comment at this point in time as to who, or if we are going to have rules, or if we're going to attempt to draw up rules for this public hearing process. In other words, what we are going to discuss, what we are going to allow to be discussed in the public hearing. As I look at the statute, it's very clear as to what we're voting on. That is the consolidation agreement. And it's also very clear that the proposed charter should be embedded or part of that consolidation agreement. And I think the Charter Commission has done a very good job of putting together a concise draft of the consolidation agreement, has put together a very readable and understandable charter, proposed charter. And those are what I would consider factual items. Those very clear as to what the Charter Commission is asking us to vote on. I do have a concern in the consolidation agreement with items E and F. And E being consolidation options and impacts, and F being the Commission's recommendations and rationale. And the reason why I have a concern about those items is that the consolidation agreement and the proposed charter are factual. The options and impacts and recommendations and rationale are based on conjecture, pure conjecture. Because no one, not this council, not the Charter Commission, knows what the governing body at the time, there'll be a governing body, I believe, elected in late 2019, which will be 10 councilors and a voting mayor. They will control the spending, they will control the organization, they will control the operation of the combined city if the voters do approve this in both cities. So, and if you look at the facts that we want the voters to vote on, they have it in the consolidation agreement and they have it in the proposed charter. There is no way that we can say that we are providing factual information to the voters is in E and F. Just no way. And I would suggest that in the public hearings that we strike E and F from the agenda, and that any discussion of E and F would be ruled out of order by you, the chairman. Now, you know, that is just, I just want to make sure that, you know, what we're talking about here is deadly serious business, and we have people coming to vote on facts. And I want to make sure that we limit the discussion to facts.
Well, I guess the question becomes who owns facts and who gets to make that decision. I certainly agree with you that on H, under the statute, with the things that must be provided, any other necessary and proper facts and terms, those sections you reference are models for ways a future government may or may not choose to reduce expenditures, et cetera. So I would not consider that to be part of the consolidation agreement that would go to voters. But at a public hearing, folks who want to make their case for or against, you know, those who want to make the case for the merger want to make the case for the merger and be heard based on what they see as potential savings. Mm-hmm. Just as those who oppose the merger will have other reasons that are outside of that document, but are their rationale. So I think it's certainly in order if folks attending a public hearing want to weigh in on what they see as what a new city could do. I would not call that out of order, but I do think the consolidation agreement that goes to voters should not include conjecture as you described it. I think that's something we may need to seek legal opinion on to make sure we're on solid ground. But clearly the documents read like a campaign piece, which is fine. The Charter Commission is free to campaign, but whether or not that's part of a document that's sent to voters or not.
Mr. Mayor, if I could. Oh, I'm sorry.
Councilor Lee, and then. Yeah.
It seems to me, though, that sub H, which you referenced, was any other necessary and proper facts and terms, is something that's in the discretion of the Joint Charter Commission, and if they believe that these submissions are necessary and proper facts and terms, it seems to me that they can choose to include them in their submissions. People are certainly capable of countering the veracity of those and questioning whether they are necessary terms and facts, but it seems to me in the Joint Charter Commission's discretion to determine what that is in submitting their document to us.
Well, go ahead.
I agree 100% with Councilor Lee there. Let counter speech serve as the arguments instead of calling people out of order for raising arguments that they wish to make in a public hearing. But I want to get back to the very next thing that comes up on our list of items that we'll be considering here over the summer, because on July 17th on the proposed tentative schedule, we've got set date for election. So in my mind, this council should be thinking about that issue more than how many public meetings we should be having and all of that. Not that that's not worthy of discussion, but the next thing that we will be considering is setting the date for this vote. And I know that I was elected by something like 12% of the registered voters in Ward 1, something to that nature, which we are in an off-year election here in 2017. And I think there's a lot to be said about having thoughtful discourse as a council about the value of setting this election during a gubernatorial year or otherwise. We had the chance to have this on a calendar last year during a presidential year when turnout is historically the highest and the most people have the opportunity to voice their opinions. I mean, anybody can come out and vote. Everybody should come out and vote on election day. But the fact is, we're coming up in an off-year election where there's not much at stake besides this issue and city council, you know, a few special elections.
I want to ask the clerk to clarify, because setting the consolidation question for the ballot appears twice. Are those two separate actions? It shows up on the 17th of July as well as the 21st of August.
It's almost as if we're going to discuss it on the 17th and come to a conclusion, and then we're going to vote on an order on the 21st.
The first would be to set the date for the election, and then the next would be approving the language so that I can order the ballots, approving the language for the ballots.
I think it's an important issue for this council to consider whether or not we want to slide this in on an off-year election when voter turnout, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Clerk, but voter turnout historically low during these off-year elections, as opposed to year when, like last year when we had a presidential election, or during a gubernatorial election. And it is within the province of this council to determine when this item comes up for vote, and that seems to me to be the biggest sort of control that we have over this entire issue.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. To the first point, the Councilor Stone raised, if we're taking a straw poll here, I would also not support limiting the speech during the public debate. I think that would be a very bad idea for us to undertake. But in regards to what Councilor Pross is raising regarding the date of the election, I think it's dangerous for us to approach the question of when we set this election date to a question about what electorate we think will be voting on this issue, because no matter how you slice that question, it becomes a question of which electorate is more legitimate to decide an issue than another. If this issue is put to a ballot and it's voted on, that's a legitimate outcome regardless of when it's held. I think if we make a distinction solely based on when we personally or politically think that this is the best time to bring this issue, I think that is would be overreach for this body. I would like us to base this decision on when do we think this process can be fully carried out in terms of the public input, and then leave the question of when this issue is put to ballot as to when it can next be put to ballot, rather than trying to make our own decision.
Well, so do we have to act on the 17th to set the date for this vote to be November? And I'm not raising this question as a reason to stall into a future date, but if it seems there's consensus, let's get a public hearing scheduled as soon as possible and hold it. That's not a debate. It's not a chance for someone to raise an issue and then we respond, or one LA or the Charter Commission respond. It's just a hearing. And perhaps Peter, or certainly we have folks here, I can open the floor after we've had more discussion with the Joint Charter Commission to see what they intend for process on their end after a public hearing. If their intent is we want to hear the public hearing information, have a meeting, and think about whether we want to entertain amendments, that will ultimately drive a timeline. that if the public hearings yield the kind of input the Charter Commission says, let's take a look at this, that may or may not warrant a change in timelines. Rather than locking us in, if the goal is to get the hearing done and there's support to lock that piece in at July 17th, then I think we can move to the next phase of let's understand from the Charter Commission what they would intend to do after a hearing.
Well, that was my final question or point, Mr. Mayor. Has the Charter Commission conveyed to us whether we choose to follow it or not? Obviously, it's within our purview to do whatever we want to do with this process, but have they conveyed to us a preference for how this public process ought to be carried out, or have they left it to our sole discretion? I would ask the manager if he's received any correspondence to that effect, or if we want to open the floor to the JCC members who are here about what their vision of this process is.
I've received no formal correspondence or communication from the Charter Commission regarding that. I think the mayor's suggestion, if I understand him correctly, about maybe taking advantage of the opportunity, there's some Joint Charter Commission members here who could participate, be helpful.
If any members want to come up. I did have, as they appeared to talk publicly, they being the Charter Commission, about submitting by June 30th, I did have an email communication with Chairman Geiger and asked him a very direct question if the commission intends to be open to amendments, as that may alter the process, and he said that the commission would be, that, at least in writing. I think that's part of the timeline flexibility here, is the extent to which there may be some back and forth. So if any members of the commission would like to come forward, or if you want to correspond with Peter later, I know we didn't schedule to invite you folks up, but if anyone would like to.
I'd be happy to answer questions. I had a hard time hearing.
All right, but if you wouldn't mind coming up, we can.
I had a very hard time hearing Councilor Burns.
My apologies.
Well, that's my problem. I can't turn them up and turn them down. And I hear Councilor Stone very well and Councilor Cross very well, and he's further away.
So the key question here is if the council is intent on trying to schedule a public hearing as soon as we're able to. If it is the intent of the Joint Charter Commission to take that hearing information and either have subsequent meetings or contemplate amendments so that we can understand what the timeline might be, and if you could just make sure you use the mic.
And I think our chair, Gene Geiger, wrote that to you and said, we're going to be there. We're going to take notes. We will meet as soon thereafter as we possibly can. We've got meetings set in both July and August, but we'll have special meetings. The issue for us is, it's very interesting that, Councilor Stone and Councilor Walker want the same thing we want. We've been at this a long time, and we would like very much to push it forward. Clearly there could be issues raised that we didn't consider, but, if you look at the data that's in the consolidation agreement, a lot of that isn't dissimilar to municipalities all over the world, and clearly all over this country. So that I don't foresee someone coming forward and saying something earth-shaking that would take us, that we'd have to have hearings of our own. I mean, recognize the Charter Commission's already had 3 public hearings on the charter and the materials that we have done. So that it isn't, and we've had fairly good attendance when we've advertised a public hearing, so that we're not averse to public input. We want to get it. We will act on it as quickly as we can, and then it's up to the City Council to say whether you want another public hearing or not, following whatever action we take. I mean, sometimes when you get into something so deeply, maybe you're blind to what possibilities might come up, and something might take extra study that I don't anticipate, but I don't think that's true. We've worked every other week for 3 years on this.
Do you have your dates for your August meeting?
Our August meeting, you mind me pulling out my...
No. I mean, 'cause one option, we could adjourn and continue the public meeting to a date certain and just set that even back in the council chamber after their meeting. So if there are any follow-up items, we can close the book and preferably perhaps do that on August 21st. I
think it's late in August. It's on a Tuesday, so it's not the 15th. It is on the 22nd. And that one's in Lewiston. The one in July is in Auburn.
Maybe my question, go ahead, Sue.
The July meeting is when?
July meeting, gotta be the 20, yeah. I know that, you know, the mayor could do this quicker than I'm doing it. I think it's the 25th, yes, it's the 25th, across the hall.
July 25th?
Yes.
And
And if you want us, I mean, I'm speaking for a
Maybe
group,
schedule a
but
special meeting.
we'll set meetings when we need to set them. You know, we're,
I mean, my request, I'll see if there's support for this, because we're not gonna do scheduling between our city, Lewiston, and the Charter Commission here in real time, but to ask Sue and Peter to work with Chip and Jean and the rest of the commission to look at a timeline where, as soon as possible, we can have our public hearing, that my recommendation be that we adjourn and continue the public hearing. We'll lock in a date for that, and in between those two dates, we would ask the Joint Charter Commission or arrange that they had met in between. And I'm sure Lewiston probably is gonna have similar interest to ensure that there is at least a chance to have reflected on any input, but I'd rather defer to staff to look at the schedule.
Yeah, this is sort of the live action doodle poll, but I think that it seems to me it makes sense that Auburn has its public hearing, Lewiston has its public hearing, and then the Joint Charter Commission will probably have its own meeting subsequent
anyway,
to that to
and
determine whether it wants to
to
make changes.
take into it. And I think the process you suggest, Mr. Mayor, is appropriate, that we work together with the two cities' representatives and get this all ironed out in a timeline.
We have another meeting next Monday, so as long as we've got that by next Monday, we can roll. Good, thank you, appreciate it. Anyone have anything else? All right, thank you, Sue. Peter? Next item, do we have the Honorable Eric Cousins and the Honorable Doug Green? Oh, no Honorable Doug, so it's just you, Eric. This is to discuss next steps on the ag study. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Councilors. We've been talking about taking a look at our agricultural economy, agricultural zoning, as well as residential areas that are fairly rural and used often for agricultural uses. And we're finally at a point now where we have funding in place to get a consultant on board and start that discussion. I've been told by past staff that this discussion has happened every 10 or 15 years over past decades. And I think it really is time to take a look at what's changed in the agricultural economy and what opportunities exist now that maybe didn't the last time, and see if we can grow that segment of our economy. We also, in talking with the consultant, are suggesting that there be somebody involved in the process, either as a committee member, or we solicit input from people involved in the processing of agricultural products and bringing them into value-added markets, or you know, the restaurant business that may be using local products to serve, and how that can play into a vibrant downtown. There's a lot of overlap in those segments of our economy in places that have both vibrant downtowns and vibrant agricultural economies. We believe that there is a couple months worth of base mapping and initial inventory work to be done before we open up to a very engaged public process. Staff is suggesting that we get that process started fairly quickly, have a consultant contract in place within the next few weeks, and then start working. We've done some work on that base mapping, but there's certainly more to do. The consultant, Ken Meter and Megan Phillips Goldenberg, have a combined experiences of over 50 years doing this type of work. We've seen some of their work, been very impressed with their work. We think we have a good consultant team to take this on. Staff is suggesting that we have a committee of 7 to a maximum of 9 members. That was something that the consultant had mentioned, not having a committee that's too large to get everybody together during that time frame, but certainly other public input opportunities so that the committee is hearing from a much larger cross-section of the community at their meetings, informing recommendations that the planning board and council could then look at. The consultant had also mentioned that it'd be great to have a member of the planning board and a member of the council on that committee, as well as wide a cross-section of agricultural or rural land users as we can, including somebody that gets involved with sort of adding value to agricultural products, not just the raw production. So we're really looking for input from the council or a collection of possible people's names for that committee. And staff is suggesting that members of the public contact their counselors and let them know if they're interested, and hopefully have a process where counselors can feed those names into staff and the mayor so we can establish a list of people, and then the appointments can be made to that committee. The consultant also mentioned that starting the public process right now in the committee's work may be a problem for people that earn their living farming, because we would be going through the late summer and early fall trying to take their time in the evenings for meetings, when maybe that more public process would be better to start after most of the agricultural activity is wrapped up for the year. And we could certainly take input from that community and people you're talking to about their schedules if they'd be interested in being on those committees. So at this point, we're really just looking for any input or changes to that game plan, and we can make adjustments based on any ideas that you folks have as counselors.
Well, thank you, Eric, and I want to thank you for sort of broadening, the stakeholders to this conversation. And you didn't mention that this was an ag zone study. I think we've all evolved to understand that, first and foremost here, we're trying to get a handle on the opportunity of the ag natural resource sector in Auburn and players within that. One additional suggestion that I would make, or at least one process suggestion, and that's that if folks are interested, rather than needing to fill out the long application, if folks just want to type a paragraph as to their particular interest or what they believe they could bring to add value to the conversation, while not everyone can be appointed, I think we may gather some insights as to how and where we can plug those additional folks in based on where they think they can add value. But we have a number of service providers that engage with farmers and those in the ag economy, and one that jumped right to mind as you were laying it out is Austin Associates. They work heavily with farms as a portion of their client base, and I think as we think about ways that we can support that portion of our economy, access to capital, as I've talked to farmers, comes up. Many of them aren't excited about a study of zoning, but when you ask them what their challenges are and issues that they face, they bring up workers, access to workers, and access to capital. And I think having folks engaged in the core group that have connections to both those issues would be important. And my preference would be obviously that they be Auburn residents on that core group, knowing that folks who may invest here but not be Auburn residents could have a chance to give input. But I think there's the core group needs to be Auburn citizens. Councilor Lee, then Councilor Burns.
I think this somewhat goes to where the mayor was going with that. The concerns that I hear in the ag zone are largely about the 50% of income portion of the ordinance, and so I would hope that we'd have some way to capture individuals who would be affected by that rule. I don't know what the best way to capture them is, since they may not be Auburn residents as a result of the rule. But I would certainly like to see some way to get folks on this group so that they can provide that input to us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I have a process question. I think I am in agreement with both you, Mr. Mayor, and Councilor Lee in regards to creating a steering committee that is broadly representative of the stakeholders that are going to be affected by the ag study. I guess in terms of process for the creation and appointment of the committee itself, are we, I know we have an appointment policy that's been in place since 2012 regarding how the city fills volunteer committee seats, do we have to create a, if we're creating the steering committee, would it be useful for this council to actually, formally create the steering committee with a set of parameters for who, what categories of individuals we're looking to appoint, and then just put that through our normal appointment process?
After talking with staff, my suggestion was that I would simply draft one, as we have for, termed studies like the sustainability and solid waste, that we would create a mayor's committee, which allows me to, with a document and a signature, establish the committee. Tonight's input is to ensure that we have sort of the feedback and input as to what we want to see on that group. And literally, as soon as the applications close, we can have a conversation, review those, and I can make the appointments and be off and running. So that's been the intent right now. And that's how we've run it with termed committees. The standing committees have fallen under the appointment process because they're ones established through formal resolve that they're standing committees, or through ordinance that this would be an ad hoc committee for the purposes of the study.
Okay.
In terms of timing, so if counselors are hearing calls or engaging folks, do we want to set a time window where we want to be soliciting? So if we send a notice out encouraging people interested through our other electronic channels, so we want to set a time window that we would close?
You certainly can do that. I think if we're working on a contract with a consultant over the next 2 to 3 weeks, if we asked people to make contact with their counselors and get their names in during the month of July with an appointment by mid-August, that seems workable, if that works for the council.
Seems like a tight turnaround to me.
I thought it seemed like it was a lot of time. So, folks are. I mean, part of my. I mean, what I would encourage all of you to do, and this is where I think we've had great success with short-term committees, is think of the folks who could bring real value to this and call them, because often it's the folks who are already busy that aren't going to proactively volunteer, but if they're asked and their input is seen as adding value because a counselor reached out to them, or a staff member, or the mayor. So I think you could put a committee like this together in 2 weeks if you had an idea of the kind of interest and you made those calls. So I think we can easily have the call out through the end of this month. That gives people 3 weeks if they're interested, but that also gives all of us 3 weeks to think of folks that we would want to proactively call.
That works well from a staff perspective. Thank you.
All set.
Thank you, Eric.
The last item is an executive session with respect to an economic development matter. I would entertain a motion from the council.
Motion to go into executive session.
I have a motion from Councilor Walker and a second from Councilor Prost to enter executive session pursuant to 1 MRS 4056C. Is there any discussion? Those in favor, show of hands. Those opposed, carries 601 with Councilor Titus absent. We will return for the meeting.
tied.
I'm going to declare us out of executive session because we handled that item efficiently. We're going to take advantage of that time and address one of the other executive session items with respect to economic development. Entertain a motion. Councilor Pross.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to Title 1 MRSA Section 405, Sub 6, Sub C.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Pross, second from Councilor Walker. Those in favor? Opposed? 403. Good evening. I call to order this meeting of the Auburn City Council for July 10th, 2017. If you'd join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have one item on the consent calendar. I would entertain a motion.
Motion to accept?
Second.
Motion from Councilor Burns, second from Councilor Walker. Those in favor, show of hands. Those opposed, carry 601. Councilor Titus has an excused absence this evening. We have the minutes from June 19th, 2017. I would entertain a motion.
Motion to
We
approve them.
accept.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Stone, second from Councilor Burns. Is there any discussion? Those in favor, show of hands. Those opposed, 601. Proclamations. I have a proclamation that was offered to me by our library director, who's been asked to come forward here because we have some guests to declare a Summer Learning Day in the city of Auburn. I appreciate Mamie bringing this forward to me. And as I often do when folks ask for proclamations, I ask for the opportunity to learn more and to find a way to make some of that learning part of the council meeting. So I reached out to Katie Grondin as well, our superintendent, and Mamie reached out to some other community groups. And I thought it may be great to hear from Mamie and maybe from some of those folks that are helping to offer summer learning opportunities for youth in our community.
Okay, the Summer Learning Day proclamation comes from an organization called the Summer Learning Association, which works across the country to promote summer learning to avoid the summer slide. And the summer slide, for people who don't know, is that on average, children lose 1 to 2 months of learning during the summer if they don't keep up their skills. So I reached out to the mayor to see if he'd be interested in doing this, and he was, which we very much appreciate. And so I reached out to all these other groups that we tried to determine, and if we missed anybody, I apologize, but we will probably be doing this on an annual basis. So tonight we have a number of people here from EL. We have the Summer Opportunities. We have Fred Lidstone and Lisa Whitman. We also have the EL principal, Scott Anier, here. From the Community Learning Center, Lucy Marin. Elementary Opportunities from the school department, Sue Doris, Michelle Gagne, and Katie Grondin, the superintendent, is also here this evening. From the YMCA, we have the Chief Executive Officer, Steve Wallace. From Literacy Volunteers, Andrew Scoggin, we have board member Lena Hahn. From the Promise Early Education Center, we have the Executive Director, Betsy Plourde. From the Boys and Girls Club, Amy Beauclair, who is the brain games teacher. From the Rec Department, we have Sabrina Best, and from the Auburn Public Library, we have Deborah Cleveland, the children's librarian. The mayor is also the representative on the board from the city, and I'm here as the library director. And then from the Pal Center, we have Chief Phil Crowell here. And Rita Beaudry was supposed to be here, but I'm not sure if she's here tonight. So there are a number of programs going on which really work well with the students to make sure that they stay up on their skills during the summer. So I'd like all the group that I introduced to stand up.
If folks
because
would,
I want to share the limelight with them too.
Yeah, and I would certainly ask if each organization that Mamie mentioned, if you could come up, introduce yourself, and maybe give us a highlight of some of the activities. We really certainly appreciate you coming out tonight. We have thousands and thousands of watchers at home, so we want to make sure we get the message out to them.
Worldwide.
Worldwide. We're live streaming all across the world.
Hi, my name is Sue Doris, and I'm the principal at East Auburn Community School and also the Title I coordinator. And I just want to share with you some of the elementary programs that we have going on this summer. We have the Washburn Summer Reading Program, and this is based on the research of Richard Allington. And as some of you know, all of the children were sent home with a library of 15 books to read. And we also have summer reading incentive programs going on at our other schools. We're doing the Maine Department of Education and the Maine Freemasons Read to Ride Summer Reading Challenges. So those are all happening. We have a summer learning program at Fairview serving 120 students entering grades 1 through 6. And we have 2 kindergarten jumpstart programs at Washburn and Walton, and those are preparing our pre-K students for kindergarten in the fall. And we also have summer programs for our English language learners and our students with special needs. We also have a before and after care summer program at East Auburn this year with weekly learning themes. So that's just captures what's going on at the elementary level, and then we have some high school folks here to talk about what's happening at the secondary schools.
Hi, my name is Lisa Whitman. I'm the math department head at Edward Little, and about 4 years ago, my colleague and I took a pilot group of kids and just changed the way we were doing things in math. And towards the end of the school year, the kids started asking about doing math over the summer. And we thought that was a little strange. Most kids are looking forward to having a break. But, you know, we started to strategize a little bit. Well, what could we do to continue their learning throughout the summer? And so the summer math program was born. And when we told the kids that we would come in once a week during the summer and work with them, they were clapping and cheering. That summer we had about 40 kids, and the last couple of summers we've had anywhere from 130 to 150 kids. Usually sometime in the first semester of school, kids start asking for the summer math application. So it's really grown, and kids either continue, move ahead in learning, or they try to catch up as well.
Awesome.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, good evening. My name is Fred Lidstone, and I'm a ELPM teacher at the high school. It's an independent after-school program. This year we have about 25 students that are in for 4 weeks, and we're working on English, science are the 2 top winners this year, a little bit of math and some social studies. We have a few seniors that we're trying to finish up, get them their diploma, and the rest of them are juniors. And I just want to thank you for your support.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. Who else would like to join our sharing circle?
Hello, I'm Amy Beauclair. I work at the Boys and Girls Club. We're running a program this summer to enhance and enrich literacy. Our age ranges from 7 to 12 that we're working with. I have currently 22 kids enrolled for 2.5 hours every day to do literacy. We're doing pen pal writing and exploring cultures and community. And these kids are, some of them, parents sign them up and they're like, oh, bah, humbug. But the rest of them are like, we want to do this. And now they're bringing their friends in. They think, for the kids that didn't want to be there, now they're bringing friends in because they're really enjoying themselves and they realize learning can be fun. And it's not just read a book, stare at the book. You know, there's a lot more involved. And of course, the kids have all the benefits of once they leave that 2.5 hours with me every day, they can go and play and share what they've just done in the classroom. And they seem to really be enjoying it. We're using a Kids Lits program, and we are sending home book bags. We're bringing books in from the library. We're having guest speakers come in and read. But like I said, I'd like to incorporate more. We're doing some writing. We're doing some pen pals. We're doing exploring other literary devices and things so that we're really tapping into learning in all different ways, a lot of hands-on, a lot of active movement. So we're making it fun for them, and they seem to really be enjoying themselves.
Great. Well, thank you for the work you're doing.
Mayor, Council. So we, at the Pal Center, we're averaging about between 30 and 40 kids right now through the summer program. We also do the breakfast and lunch program, so we build off from that. After lunch is when we do a lot of our activities. We partner with the library. The library provides us the books. We're able to swap those books out. Kids have quiet time. We have a teen quiet area as well as games, activities, and we're doing a lot outdoors as well for this year's event. So part of our effort is a lot of these kids are not plugged in to some of the other summer programming, so this provides them an opportunity to come and have a drop-in center where they can come, and we probably have 4 or 5 volunteers that are there through some different programming throughout the community, that this is part of their program, is to come and work with our youth. And so, so we have an exciting program this year, so thanks.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. I'm from the YMCA, and we have just about 400 kids in 3 different camps in our child care right now. As a matter of fact, they ripped me out of my office as the CEO, and today I was teaching gem hunting. So we kind of have a lot of different things. We have a program, and kudos to the Auburn Library. We have a reading program with one of our camps. The number one reason why parents sign kids up for this camp is the reading program at the Auburn Library. So very much thank you for that. We also have outdoor camps. So today we had kids from varied backgrounds for the very first time see a salamander, catch a crayfish. And you say, how do you do achievement gap with those types of things? Well, they're shooting bows and arrows, but you still add up the numbers and the targets. You still do arts and crafts, and you count different things. So it's given kids a really great experience in the Maine outdoors, seeing different things, and then the partnerships with some of the other clubs, PAL, places like that. Also 21st Century grant, so we're partnering with educators. They do what they do best, and we do what we do best. So I'm proud to say that the folks that we have, the kids that we have with us, it's part of a partnership with a lot of different Auburn and Lewiston agencies.
Thank you, Steve.
Good evening. My name is Lena Han, and I'm proud to be on the Board of Directors of Literacy Volunteers and to support this very worthwhile organization. I don't have exact specifics, but I'll tell you a little bit about what our organization does. We don't just teach people how to read and write. Our programs go all year long. We work with not just Americans. We work with a lot of citizens who are from other countries, who are here legally, and we teach them not only to read and write, but also the customs and families. We work with the parents and the children, how to work and be a part of the community to help them ultimately become beneficial to the community. We greatly appreciate all the support that we receive within this community. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for coming.
Good evening. My name is Betsy Norcross-Plord. I'm the director at Promise Early Education Center. We were formerly known as Androscoggin Head Start and Child Care. And we have 2 classrooms actually here in Auburn that operate throughout the summer. So it serves children between the ages of 6 weeks and 5, and what it really means for those kiddos is they have that opportunity to be in a safe environment where their needs are completely met, nutritional needs, health needs, educational needs, and particularly for those children who are in our preschool classroom, it's the opportunity to continue that learning experience. They benefit from our use of a curriculum called OWL. It's opening the world of learning, excuse me. It is language and literacy rich. So our focus at Promise is ensuring that children enter school ready to learn with their peers, because the population that we serve is a low-income population. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here in Auburn, and if you've never visited our classrooms at Webster, I would urge you to give us a call. They are lovely environments, and we'd love to have you come visit. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Debbie Cleveland. I'm the children's librarian at the Auburn Public Library. Last year, our summer reading program, we served 500 children, and so we're hopeful that we were going to reach that number again this year. We provide an in-house summer reading program where the children are encouraged to read books, and we offer small incentives along the way, and when they've read 10 books, they get a free gift book at the end of the summer that they can take home and keep, because there's nothing more powerful than giving a child a book that belongs to them that they can keep. This year, we also partner, this has been going on for several years, but we are partnering with the Auburn Rec Department, and we bring a story time to the Rec Department once a week with a bag of books, so the campers have access to books all week. And we also partnered with the Auburn School, Summer School at East Auburn. We are bringing them bags of books based on themes every week. So, and in addition to just offering a summer reading program, we have lots of great programs to get their families into the library. So our hope is that once they're in the library, they're going to check out books and they're going to be reading. So thank you for letting us be here and toot our own horn. Thank you.
Sabrina Best, the Recreation Director. Debbie kind of touched a little bit upon what she does for us here with the rec department. So I kind of just wanted to share that we have this group of kids, of boys, that all they want to do is play sports. And they didn't grasp the meaning or understanding of why it's important to continue reading through the summertime. One of the boys made a comment of, you know, I'm just here to play the sports. And I told them, I go, well, that's great. Once you hit middle school and they start checking your grades, you won't be able to play sports. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I explained to them that you need to make sure that you maintain your academic side because you will always be a student before an athlete. And what that means as being an important part of the reading program in the summertime for the rec camp. So I just wanted to share that little part of it.
Well, I want to thank our library director again for bringing this to me and helping to organize having speakers. I want to thank the superintendent. Often when we think about education in our community, certainly we look directly to the school department and the school committee for their leadership, and I think we saw demonstrated their research-based approaches to continuing education year-round, but that we have so many community partners that work with each other beyond what they do as individual organizations. I think it's a real testament to this community's continued commitment to education. So for those who came tonight, for your staff, your board members, I want to thank you on behalf of the city for all you're doing this summer. And you're welcome, as I tell everyone, to stay for the duration of the city council meeting. Or you can go home and barbecue because it's still light out. Thank you, everyone. We are at the first open session of tonight's meeting. Any member of the public is welcome to speak to the council on any issue directly related to city business that is not on the agenda, and I will open the floor.
Charles Soul, 135 Bartlett Street, Lewiston, Maine. I graduated from Ed Little High School as the class president, so I want to qualify myself for having the right to speak to this community. I also would like to mention that back in 1967, I attended Washburn School for summer reading sessions, and believe me, it was quite enjoyable, as I didn't have to, I could wear shorts and sneakers. It was more of a casual atmosphere. It was till 12 noon, and it aided me immensely. I have my own website now, and I write short stories, poems, and I have 4,000 people on LinkedIn.com, and I'm branched out to my website and also to Facebook. But that's not the real issue that I'm here for. But I did want to thank Washburn School and the City of Auburn for that opportunity, because it has done me a great service back then. What I'm here to discuss tonight is that I'm a little worried about the public having access to a readable copy of the new charter being put out by those that wish to consolidate. I would like to know if the city of Auburn and Lewiston are going to be giving people copies of the charters so that they can read it. Now, I don't know if they have given you copies or how many pages it is, but sometimes when people don't read the details, then they don't know what they're getting into. Like take the Bates Mill exit strategy, which on transfer from the city to a private developer, $27 million went, and then later on we found out it was 3 parking garages, and then every parking space had to be paid for. So sometimes the public is just looking at the outside of the book, the pamphlet or whatever, and say, oh, how pretty, what a great idea. It's in the details that is what count. And I have not heard, I myself, I didn't get on the internet until I was 50 years old. I'm 64, by the way. And, you know, My mother's 90. We like to read things. We're not going to go chasing through the internet, a lot of us, because we didn't grow up with the technology. So I was hoping that this council would be able to address the issue of where people can find a copy of the new charter, and also if they can possibly get a hard copy of it. So I want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. And once again, to the Washburn people, check out my website, and you'll find out my short stories and poems are they're getting great reviews. Thanks to Washburn's summer school program and Auburn. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Mamie Nye, Auburn Public Library Director. I would just like to say that both the Auburn and the Lewiston Library have received copies of all the documents. We have a copy in reference, and we hope to have a couple of copies that we will be able to lend out. So if people are looking for information about the Charter Commission report, you can get it at the libraries. Thank you.
I'll bring it back to the City Council. There is no unfinished business. New business, Councilor Lee.
Sure. I'd like to move Order 5707102017, appointing Jennifer Kimball to serve on the Auburn Housing Authority with a term expiration of 10/1/2021. Order 5807102017, appointing Linda Wooten to serve on the Auburn Lewiston Advisory Cable TV Committee with a term expiration of 6/1/2019. Order 5907102017, appointing the following to serve on the Complete Streets Committee: David Das, Jeremiah Bartlett, term expirations of 1/1/20, Dana Staples, term expiration of 1/1/2019, and Larry Pelletier, term expiration of 1/1/2018. I'd also like to move Order 6007102017, appointing the following to serve on the Conservation Commission: Benjamin Lowe and Joanna Flood, term expirations of 6/1/2019, and Rihanna LaRose, term expiration 6/1/2018, as well as Order 6107102017, appointing Chad Roberts to serve on the Lewiston Auburn Transit Committee, term expiration 7/1/2020.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Lee, second from Councilor Burns. Is there any discussion from the council?
I would just thank my peers on the appointment committee for doing the due diligence of working through these appointments, and I think we have a good batch of candidates, and I would thank the folks who are here who have been a part of, who are either up for appointment today, or any of those who may have sought appointment but may not have been recommended to the full council. We have vacancies that come up every month. I would encourage folks to continually check out our City of Auburn website for vacancies to our agencies, boards, and commissions. This is where a lot of the real work happens, and a great opportunity for members of the public to engage in city business. So if you're looking for ways to get involved, I would encourage folks to check out the city website.
I'd also like to commend this group and thank you for stepping up to volunteer and serve your city. It's people like you who make this city good.
Public comment? All right, I will ask for a vote by a show of hands. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carry 6-0-1. Reports, I have no report this evening. Councilor Young, anything?
No report.
Councilor Cross?
I've got a few items. On June 29th, we had World Refugee Day, and I had the distinct honor of standing in your shoes, Mr. Mayor, to join the Mayor of Lewiston in issuing a joint proclamation recognizing the value that the refugee community brings to our community of Lewiston and Auburn, and it was a really wonderful day for the city. I hope that all of you had a chance to see the coverage that was in the Lewiston Sun-Journal highlighting some of the events that occurred on that day. It was a great day. I also want to acknowledge that on July 10th, at least according to the tentative schedule that we looked at this evening, we'll be taking up a workshop item with regard to voting locations. As the mayor's appointee to the school committee, there has been some discussion and concern within the school committee with regard to the safety of having schools as polling locations. I want to make sure that the public is aware that if you are interested in that topic, and I will bring this up on Wednesday at the school committee meeting, that it looks like July 10th is going to be the evening that we'll be workshopping that issue. 17th, it looks like it was on for both dates. Polling locations was on for both dates, so.
Today's the 10th.
Oh, well, there we go. Yes, the 17th, excuse me. So that's coming up if that's a matter of interest to you, and I will mention that again on Wednesday night. I did want to mention to this body that one of the issues that the school committee has been grappling with since early spring was around the topic of professional development for teachers. The elementary schools, as residents of Auburn are probably aware, the elementary schools have early releases on Wednesdays of every week when it's a normal school week. That is to say that there's not a day off for a holiday or a teacher workshop. And the Auburn School Committee has been looking at that issue closely, specifically with the interest of the school department in expanding professional development time for the middle school and also for Auburn High School. There has been some public dialogue over the last couple of months around that issue. The budget season did certainly present challenges for the school committee. The first time this came up for vote, it was tabled, and it's just kind of come back around several times. At our last meeting, the school committee at a workshop decided that what we would do is formulate a committee, a formal committee, that is all-encompassing and includes stakeholders from teachers to parents to members of this body to basically everybody with an interest in this issue, which really is the entire community. Extending half-day Wednesdays or coming up with a different plan that provides for early release or early start. We really looked at all of those issues, and there are a lot of consequences for the different stakeholders in the community, and I think the school committee is very interested in making sure that we hear from everybody on this issue. I haven't seen anything formal yet. It's not to say that anything hasn't been done, but since our last school committee meeting, I haven't seen anything formal with regard to the formulation of that committee. There was a sign-up sheet at our last meeting a couple weeks ago, and I expect to hear more on Wednesday with regard to the formal process of enrolling members in this committee to look at this issue. There's definitely a need for professional development for our teachers, but the proposed solutions range from having half-day Wednesdays for Auburn High School and Middle School, to early start for Auburn Middle School and the high school, to doing nothing until the union contract comes up in 2 years in 2019, and making sure that the cost of professional development is built into the total contract costs for teachers' times instead of sort of externalizing that cost onto children. So we have really workshopped many different ideas around this topic of how do we provide professional development to the middle school teachers and staff and the high school teachers and staff in a similar manner that we're providing to the elementary school. What's the best approach to that? It's a big question that this community needs to resolve. And at this point, the school committee said, let's have a really all-encompassing committee that will report back with some final recommendations to the school committee in March of 2018, so that changes to the school calendar will be implemented beginning in September of 2018, and we can go from there. So that was kind of where we left off on the issue when we workshopped it 2 weeks ago at the school committee meeting. I wanted to report back to all of you. I know that during budget season, issues can easily be buried. But as we work forward, it's important to realize that the school committee is grappling with some real issues around proficiency-based diploma requirements from the state, and how do we ensure that our middle school and high school teachers are prepared to implement some of those changes that are sort of coming from the top down. So wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that, and we will be talking about that more in the near future. But be on the lookout if you're a concerned citizen, a parent, taxpayer, stakeholder in any way, that there will be a formal committee set up to examine that issue, and your input will be very important to future policy decisions of the school committee, and we'll be taking up those recommendations in March of 2018. I also want to alert everybody, we had our first reading on a policy change which would adopt proficiency-based diploma standards. That's sort of been a statewide initiative, and we've been looking at that as a school committee and school department for several years now, and the second reading on that change in policy, adopting the specific standards for proficiency-based diploma, I understand will be coming up on Wednesday. So if you have a particular issue on that, just be aware that it's out there. Feel free to communicate directly with me if you'd like. I'd be happy to address those concerns. To me, this is a issue that the school department has really worked very diligently on, and in my reading of the policy, it seems that we're on the right path in complying with state law and probably going a little bit above and beyond. We actually sat through a lengthy presentation about, I think it was 6 weeks ago, that was really well done by Roz Walton in the school department, and it really did break down and explain proficiency-based diploma and really did offer a lot of answers on how, it really addressed a lot of concerns about how a diploma that's proficiency-based could be viewed by potential colleges compared to the traditional standard, and a lot of those questions are typical questions that would come up. They're answered in a PowerPoint presentation that was given, I think it was either 4 or 6 weeks ago now. I'd encourage you to get online if you're interested, look at the school committee agenda and minutes, and you'll find that PowerPoint presentation on there. It was really well done and answered a lot of those questions. So I wanted to let everybody know that those things are happening at the school committee level as well.
Yes. 6 months ago, we were talking about clogged sidewalks and problems with our snowplows, and now we're talking about dust. Park Avenue in Ward 2 is coming along. At first, it was heavy blasting, and now it's trying to keep the dust down. Hampshire Street is well underway, and also Lake Street. We had a problem when we did the sidewalks up on Lake Street last year. The grass that was planted to come down to meet the sidewalks never did take, and so I've been working with staff to, get that fixed. It's been a big issue with the property owners up there. So a lot of construction projects going. I think it's going to be well worth the wait, and we were long overdue on Park Avenue and Hampshire Street for sure. So looking forward to the completion of those projects in the fall.
Yes, so right before this meeting, I was very excited to go out to Food Joy in South Auburn Organic Farm and have a tour from their executive director, Karen Bolduck. Food Joy recently launched a really cool project, which is CSA/meal kit, similar to what you would get from a national place like Blue Apron, except that it's LA, Lewis and Auburn only deliveries, and all of the food comes from local food resources. And they deliver it to you at your home. It's a wonderful farm out there. I'd encourage everybody to visit, and it's one of the things that's happening in Lewis and Auburn that's fantastic. I am not. I did not get in on time in order to have that. I did see Jim Prosser's wife.
Yeah, we did. We did get in on time on that, and my wife has never cooked so well since we've been getting those meals home. Thank you.
What about you?
I find the recipes a little too challenging for me, frankly.
No report.
No report from me as well, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a brief report on 3 items and then a little lengthier report regarding the New Auburn Development Project. I would like to encourage the mayor and the councilors to let me know if there are workshop topics that you would like to have put on the agenda in the future as part of the FY 2017-2018 work plan. I would appreciate that. There are some things that I'm still not fully aware of, so if you have an item that you think is important for a workshop, please let me know. Also, I wanted to let you know that recently I spoke with the superintendent of schools about what's happening with the process regarding increased funding. She hopes to receive word by the end of this month, July 31st. She really couldn't tell me any more details than that today. She's following it closely. I also want to mention that in terms of the council constituent concerns, staff have been working hard to try and address those. As I think you know, when the new assistant city manager is on board, Denise Clavette, my plan is to work with her to formalize that process more along the lines of what I've talked to you about previously. The budget took up a lot of time, as you can appreciate, and other things as well. On the New Auburn development, I just would like to share with you some information on that. The staff continues to make progress towards the implementation of the New Auburn Village Center plan. Some highlights of the project at this time are, thanks to the City Council, we have added appropriations to be able to expand the amount of the construction in 2018. And based on the increased budget, a bid package is being put together to construct the Village Center Greenway, River Road, and expanded parking area for existing New Auburn businesses. Should be released in early winter of 2017 for work to begin in the spring of 2018. Final negotiations are almost complete for the acquisition of a key property that will clear the way for constructing the Riverway Road. In addition, construction drawings should be complete by the end of August. The city is discussing a possible financial contribution from a private company that would help fund a handicap accessible trail and dock to the Androscoggin River. An architecture professor from Central Maine Community College is developing preliminary drawings for a structure to house the St. Louis Bells that could be located somewhere in the New Auburn Village Center. 2 grants are being applied for this year, one from the Northern Borders Regional Commission and the other for a DOT Transportation Alternatives Program. And finally, a consultant has been selected to lead a street redesign of Main Street. Mill Street and Broad Street in New Auburn will focus on slowing traffic down and improving pedestrian safety. Dates for public input meetings will be announced when a schedule has been set. Eric Cousins, the Deputy Economic Community Development Director for the city, is taking the lead on this project, and I am very encouraged by what I'm seeing. Thank you.
And I believe, and Eric is still here, there's about $1 million of construction money available when those pedestrian and traffic slowdown improvements are recommended. There's about $1 million to spend on implementation of federal money. So there's already money available, so when the planning is done, it's not a plan and wait. So staff has done a great job lining those up.
Thank you.
We are at the second open session. If you did not get a chance earlier and you'd like to come forward to speak to the City Council. Okay, I will close the open session. There is one remaining executive session this evening. There is no action that is expected after that, so we will simply return from that executive session to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we enter into executive session to discuss an economic development matter pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 405(6)C.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Burns, second from Councilor Walker. Those in favor, show of hands. Those opposed, 601. Thank you, Council. I will declare us out of executive session, and would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So,
Second.
Motion from Councilor Lee, second from Councilor Burns.
Yes! Woo!
In favor of adjournment, show of hands. Carries 6-0-1.